Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching WION World is One. This is Gravitas with a new look, but the same old spirit. I am Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. When Hamas accepted a ceasefire proposal on Monday, it upended Israel's expectation of what comes next in the Gaza war. You see, Israel spent much of its time blaming the Palestinian group for the collapsing ceasefire talks. Having assumed that Hamas would reject the truce proposal, Israel focused on launching airstrikes on Rafah. It focused on telling the world that it had no choice but to send troops to Rafah. What it did not expect was Hamas to accept the ceasefire proposal. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a tough choice. A choice between coming up with a new reason to justify the Rafah offensive or shaking hands with Hamas. What will Netanyahu do next? Will he choose war or peace with Hamas? We will tell you that and more tonight and focus on those questions. Also coming up for you on the show, China is hell-bent on gathering more enemies. A Chinese fighter jet has dropped flares over an Australian helicopter. This happened over international waters. We get you the details. The world has entered a new era of missile warfare. Which country is in possession of which missiles? Which country has the deadliest missiles? That's coming up on Gravitas Deep Dive. Who will be Donald Trump's pick for vice president? Mike Pence, who was Trump's vice president when he was in office, has now become a Trump critic. So who will Trump pick as his running mate as he prepares for another face-off with US President Joe Biden? Is it time we start calling Nepal an amoeba republic? And why do parties, governments and coalitions in the country keep splitting? We untangle this curious case on the show tonight. The Rafah offensive or peace with Hamas? Israel's defiant Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is staring at tough choices. Support for Netanyahu is also collapsing, by the way. The world is losing patience. The US is losing patience. And most importantly, Israelis are losing patience. On Monday, thousands of Israelis once again marched towards Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem with banners reading, "The blood is on your hands." Their demand was simple: say no to Rafah, say yes to the ceasefire deal. You see, there are many in Israel who don't believe Netanyahu wants a new hostage deal. And no, these are not just the families of those still being held in Gaza. In a post on the platform X, the Israeli opposition leader and former Prime Minister Yair Lapid said that the Netanyahu government was not serious about freeing the hostages. He said, and I'm quoting, "A government that wants to return the abductees should be convening an urgent discussion and sending the negotiating teams to Cairo, not hysterically issuing 3 different briefings from different parties and crushing the hearts of the families. A national disgrace. There is no limit." Such is the level of skepticism. In fact, a majority in Israel believe that their prime minister wants to string out the fighting for as long as possible. And why is that, you ask? Well, it is so that he can remain in power. A ceasefire could very likely spell the end of Netanyahu's wartime government if its right-wing allies resign in protest. So when the news came that Hamas had accepted a deal, groups in Israel representing hostages cheered. The hostages' families urged the Israeli government to turn this opportunity into a deal and bring back those held captive. Remember, Israel estimates that 128 of the 250 hostages abducted by militants on the 7th of October still remain in Gaza, including 35 who the military says are dead. But what was the reaction from Netanyahu? The Israeli Prime Minister's first public response was to say that Hamas was far from meeting Israel's demands. Nonetheless, he dispatched a negotiating team to Cairo to discuss it. Now, this is new. It shows that Netanyahu government was taking Hamas acceptance seriously. But parallelly, IDF troops were sent to Rafah. Now, this complicates matters, you see. The fact that troops have been sent to Rafah, where today they have taken control of the crossing, shows that Netanyahu does not intend to halt the war. He knows a ceasefire now could very well likely spell the end of his government. Now, is Netanyahu then deliberately complicating matters to buy time to justify the Rafah invasion? We would not be surprised. But Israel's closest ally, the US, is against it. On Monday, President Joe Biden urgently warned Netanyahu against launching the Rafah offensive. Recently, the divide between the two leaders has grown amid mounting Palestinian death toll. Both leaders are facing growing public pressure. Biden from Americans who are questioning the country's support for Israel, and Netanyahu from the families of the hostages. The two leaders reportedly spoke on the phone for 30 minutes before Hamas accepted the ceasefire proposal. Biden reportedly told Netanyahu that he still believes a ceasefire with Hamas is the best way to protect lives of Israeli hostages. Last week, the Biden administration put on hold a shipment of American precision weapons to Israel. This was the first time since October 7 that the U.S. stopped weapons for Israel. It's big because Israel is among the largest recipients of the U.S. military aid in the world. Why the decision was made has still not been made clear. Could it be because the U.S. is worried about Netanyahu's defiance as far as Rafah is concerned? Now, following his call with Netanyahu, but privately, reports say that the Biden administration is worried, and it has been worried for a while, that the Gaza war will drag America into a wider conflagration. It worries about the wave of attacks by Iran-backed groups like Hezbollah and Houthis. Will the U.S. then be forced to open the Iran window? Initiate talks with its adversary, Iran? Too soon to say. Biden also, by the way, hosted King Abdullah II of Jordan for a private lunch meeting at the White House. And taking to the platform X, King Abdullah warned that an Israeli operation on Rafah threatens to lead to a new massacre. Meanwhile, even Lebanon's Ministry of Foreign Affairs warned against the escalation by the Israeli forces against Rafah. Nobody wants Israel to send troops to Rafah. Sure, it remains the last unexplored part of Gaza, so-called, but is it really the location of Hamas leaders? Israel says Hamas has 4 battalions in Rafah and that it must send in the ground forces to topple them. But currently, Rafah houses nearly 1 million displaced Palestinians. How will the IDF be able to identify Hamas fighters from them? Israel's original plan was to crush Hamas. That was its end game, not Rafah. Has Netanyahu forgotten his original goal? By sending troops to Rafah, the only thing he gets is a prolonged war. More deaths, more devastation. Sure, it will help him stay in power longer, but will it really help him in the long run is the question. He is already on borrowed time. One thing is for sure, Israel's Rafah offensive is going to be a gamble. If Israel does not succeed, Netanyahu will be left with few places to turn to. And this might be the best deal that Netanyahu is going to get. The US, Qatar, Egypt, Hamas all agree. The question is, will Netanyahu accept that time is running out for him? Rules-based world order. Now, that's one of the many things that China does not understand. Aggression, provocation. Now, these are Chinese mantras. Let me tell you what China has been up to. Chinese fighter planes have fired flares towards an Australian Navy helicopter. This happened on Saturday. Australian Navy's MH-60R Seahawk helicopter was flying over the Yellow Sea. The chopper was flying in international airspace over international waters. It was operating from the destroyer HMS Hobart and was part of Operation Argos. What's that? It's part of the United Nations efforts to enforce sanctions on North Korea. That is when a Chinese Air Force J-10 jet dropped flares above the helicopter. It also dropped flares on the helicopter's parts. Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles said the Chinese jet, quote-unquote, dropped flares about 300 meters in front of the Seahawk helicopter and about 60 meters above it. Marles added this was an unsafe maneuver which posed a risk to the aircraft and the personnel. Australian Prime Minister, meanwhile, calling the Chinese conduct completely unacceptable. You see, if a flare hits an aircraft, be it a fighter jet or a helicopter, the machine can be damaged. If the flare hits the rotor blades of a helicopter, the chopper can go down. If it hits the engine, there can be a mid-air blast. That's the kind of danger we are looking at. And that's the level of danger the Chinese were toying with in international airspace. Australia says its pilot was forced to, quote-unquote, take evasive actions in order to not be hit by those flares. So, why did China do what it did? The Chinese Foreign Ministry has an explanation, if that is what you would want to call it. Let me read it out for you. That's what the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian has said. I'm quoting now. Under the guise of implementing United Nations Security Council resolutions, Australian warships and aircraft deliberately approached China's airspace to cause trouble and provocation, endangering China's maritime and air security. As a warning, the Chinese military took necessary measures at the scene. Relevant operations are legal, compliant, professional, and safe. Let me repeat that. China says its actions were legal, compliant, professional, and safe. Dropping flares is legal and safe. As per which book exactly? But this is the kind of dangerous maneuver that China thrives in. Last year, a Chinese warplane fired flares in front of a Canadian military helicopter. It happened over the international waters of the South China Sea. Canadian Armed Forces said there was a risk posed to the helicopter as the flares could have hit the rotor blades or the engines. Canada called the Chinese action unsafe, non-standard, and unprofessional. But this, you see, is classic China. In the year 2022, a Chinese Navy vessel pointed a laser at an Australian military aircraft. This happened close to Australia's north coast. The same year, a Chinese fighter jet dangerously intercepted an Australian military surveillance plane. This happened over the South China Sea. In November 2023, a Chinese destroyer injured Australian Navy divers. This happened in Japanese waters. Canberra claims Chinese destroyer deliberately blasted the Australian divers with sonar pulses. Beijing obviously denies the allegations as it continues gathering enemies through its actions. Did you know that the Chinese have allegedly hacked the British Ministry of Defence? The personal information of UK's military personnel has been hacked, and all fingers are pointing at China. Here's what happened. A third-party payroll system that the British Ministry of Defence uses was hacked. The system had names of current and past members of the British Armed Forces. It had their bank details, their residential address. Hackers accessed most of this information. The cyber attack was discovered some days ago. Authorities are trying to figure out the extent of the attack. While the UK has not named any country, the disclosure comes on the heels of what happened in the month of March. In a first, the UK and the US jointly accused China of a global cyber attack campaign. And as expected, China is trying to distance itself from the issue. The Chinese Foreign Ministry, in fact, says it quote-unquote rejects the use of this issue politically to smear other countries. You see, by now the world can see through these statements. It has observed the pattern of Chinese aggression, its habit of breaking international laws, coming in the way of freedom of navigation. With its actions, China is only gathering more enemies. In the year 1944, when the Germans launched the V-2 missiles to strike London during World War II, the world entered a new era in air defense. It was the dawn of the missile age. 80 years later, the world has entered a new era in missile defense, one in which multiple powerful countries are competing to build the best missile. The success of ballistic missile defenses from Ukraine to West Asia proves this. In fact, experts say that these successes will intensify the missile arms race. And tonight on Gravitas Deep Dive, we tell you all about the missile warfare and its evolution. On the 13th of April, Iran launched as many as 120 intermediate-range ballistic missiles at Israel. It was Iran's revenge attack. Israel and the US responded by destroying nearly all of them. They used the American SM-3 and the Israeli Arrow interceptors. The incident was big for many reasons, but it was especially significant because it was the first time in combat that guided missile destroyers fired missiles especially developed to intercept ballistic missiles. While the missiles have been in use for more than 2 decades, undergoing a wide range of tests, this was the first time they were used in real-world situation. The SM-3 was fired from American destroyers that were placed off the coast of Israel. Now, previously, the interceptors fired from US Navy destroyers have targeted Houthi missiles. Before that, Russia fired its feared hypersonic missiles, KH-47M2 Kinzhal, at Ukraine. In fact, the Ukraine war has witnessed the use of hypersonic weapons on a battlefield for the first time. Now, for the unversed, a hypersonic missile travels at high speeds. They are feared because they are difficult to intercept. The US does not have one. China has developed and deployed them. In March, India tested its Agni 5 ballistic missile with multiple warhead technology. So what does all this point towards? Militaries around the world are looking to invest in ballistic missile defense. Now, before we go any further, let's just understand what missiles really are and how they contribute to a country's air defense. A missile is a rocket-propelled weapon. It is designed to deliver an explosive warhead with great accuracy at high speed. They vary from small tactical weapons, effective out to only a few hundred feet, to much larger strategic weapons that have ranges of several thousand miles. So how many types of missiles are there? Tactical guided missiles are generally categorized according to how they are fired. There are 5 types: air-to-air, air-to-surface, surface-to-air, anti-ship, and anti-tank or assault. And then there are ballistic missiles, most often characterized as short-range, medium-range, intermediate-range, and intercontinental ballistic missiles or ICBMs. ICBMs, of course, are some of the most lethal weapon systems out there. Last month, the Russian military successfully test-launched an ICBM. They never revealed the name of its ICBM, but it came amid its conflict with the West. And before that, North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom, tested an ICBM, one with a potential range exceeding 15,000 kilometers, capable of reaching any part of continental US. So what really is driving this new missile race? Rising insecurity driven by multiple global conflicts. Military planners and policymakers around the world view missile capabilities as essential to preserving peace and maintaining deterrence. Just have a look at the headlines these days. The world is at war. Where there is no war, there is a threat of conflict, there is competition, changing geopolitical dynamics, multiple conflicts, competition between China and the US are therefore driving substantial investments by states in a range of missile capabilities. Action-reaction between parties in conflict accelerated missile proliferation trends. Take, for example, China's firing of ballistic missiles over Taiwan in August 2022, then North Korea's unprecedentedly intense missile launching campaigns in 2022-2023, or South Korea's demonstration of novel missile capabilities in 2021. Other countries are also in pursuit of missiles. Australia is seeking long-range strike capabilities under the AUKUS arrangement. The tiny island nation of Taiwan, facing the threat of Chinese invasion, is also focusing on indigenously developed surface-to-surface missile capabilities. And China is investing heavily in conventionally armed ballistic missiles. The Pentagon believes that China currently has 500 DF-26 missiles designed to accurately strike targets thousands of kilometers away. And that puts the US and allied bases in Japan and Guam within range of an attack that may only come with 20 to 30 minutes warning. Meanwhile, traditional military powers like the US are working on arming itself with a new nuclear missile, a gigantic ICBM called the Sentinel. All these countries see missiles as essential for both deterrence as well as for war. No doubts then, the world is on the cusp of a new missile range, and the race is well and truly on. A quick look now at some of the stories that we have lined up for you on the show tonight. Scientists have developed a new all-in-one vaccine that they hope can be effective against a broad range of coronaviruses, past, present and future. We tell you all about this on the show tonight. Does Chinese President Xi Jinping love a good cognac? French President Emmanuel Macron has presented 2 bottles of cognac to Xi Jinping. There was a secret message in Macron's choice of gift. We will tell you all about this in our special report coming up shortly. And also coming up, we bring you the best of Met Gala. Donald Trump is on the hunt. The former US president is looking for a running mate or his vice president. Should Trump win the race to the White House? Does Trump have a candidate in mind? Will he host a reality show to find his vice president? Our next report explores.
Donald Trump is running for office. You already know that. But do you know who will be Trump's running mate? Who will be Trump's pick for vice president? The former president is yet to decide. What we have is a diverse list of potential candidates. First up is Marco Rubio. He is the son of Cuban immigrants. Rubio has strong foreign policy credentials. He also has a track record of attracting Latino voters. But do Trump and Marco Rubio get along? During the 2016 GOP primaries, Trump famously dubbed Rubio as Little Marco. Rubio has branding Trump as a con man with small hands. Next is Tim Scott. He is the first black senator from South Carolina. Scott has helped pass an important piece of Trump-era legislation, the First Step Act and a bipartisan prison reform law. Doug Burgum is on the list too. He is the governor of North Dakota. The man also has a net worth of over $1.1 billion. Then you have Tulsi Gabbard. She is a former lawmaker, also a former Democrat, and the first practicing Hindu member of Congress. Gabbard is an Indian American. US media reports claim Trump and Gabbard have already had conversations on several policy matters. Could Gabbard be Trump's running mate? She can appeal to disenchanted Democrats. Also with her, Trump will get a female running mate. Now, for the longest time, Vivek Ramaswamy was considered to be the default pick for the position. But reports say Trump and Ramaswamy have spoken. The former president has reportedly told Ramaswamy that he will be considered for an office should Trump be elected, but that office won't be that of the vice president. So who will it be? We will tell you once Trump decides. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Over 4 years ago, when the Wuhan virus pandemic hit, it turned the world upside down. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody was prepared. It took over a year for researchers to develop a vaccine. What happens if another such disaster strikes again? Well, this time, we better be prepared. Scientists have developed an all-in-one vaccine, one that may protect us from future coronaviruses. You heard that right. Let me tell you all about it. This vaccine has been developed by scientists from the universities of Oxford, Cambridge and Caltech. It has been tested on mice. How does it work? You see, it's different from our regular vaccines in two major ways. Number one, it has a broad immune response, as in it can protect us from a wide range of viruses, as opposed to conventional vaccines that only include a single antigen. How so? You see, while testing, the scientists included different viral antigens in a single vaccine. These antigens were held together by a protein superglue. In scientific terms, it's known as quartet nanocage technology. When the dose was administered to mice, it trained their immune systems to recognize a broad range of coronaviruses. Number two, the vaccine is part of a new approach. It's called proactive vaccinology. It means vaccines are made even before a disease-causing pathogen becomes a threat. In line with that, the new vaccine can train our immune system to recognize parts of 8 coronaviruses. This includes several strains that are currently circulating in bats and could one day infect human beings. And this means we are preparing well in advance for future pandemics. And why not? We don't really need to sit around and wait for another pandemic to happen. The COVID-19 virus has been around for well over 4 years. We know enough about it, and several other strains have also emerged over the years. We also know about how our bodies react to these viruses, how our immune systems respond. Considering all of that, we are very well in a position to take precautions, and scientists are doing exactly that. Speaking of which, is this the first time this is happening? No, it isn't. Broad-spectrum vaccines have been around for a while. But the latest one is much simpler in design than other such vaccines in development. And as for proactive vaccinology, last year, 3 projects in the UK alone received £25 million in funding for research. The ambitious research aims to develop new, broader, and longer-lasting vaccines. You see, we have learned our lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. It wiped away millions of people, and we cannot afford another one. So scientists are busy working on the future of vaccines. And this time, we will hopefully be ready. How can you smooth over trade tensions with the Chinese President Xi Jinping? Perhaps try charming him with a bottle of cognac or two. Is that the strategy that French President Emmanuel Macron was going for? Does Xi Jinping love cognac? You see, Xi Jinping is in Paris for a state visit, his first one to Europe in 5 years. And on this momentous occasion, Macron carefully picked out gifts for him. I say carefully because there is more than what meets the eye. Macron presented 2 cognac bottles to the Chinese president. Now, it's symbolic because China recently opened an anti-dumping investigation into European brandy. This mainly means French cognac. The move is being seen as a retaliation to the EU investigations into Chinese subsidies for electric cars and medical devices. Tensions between the 2 economic powerhouses were simmering. These same disputes took the center stage in the talks between Xi and Macron on Monday. And after these talks, the 2 leaders exchanged gifts as per the protocol. Xi Jinping presented the French president with a striking stuffed bird, French language books published in China, and a painting. Macron, meanwhile, offered rare volumes by Victor Hugo, the first French-Chinese dictionary, a sculpted glass vase from Amboise, and 2 bottles of cognac, a Hennessy XO and a prized Louis XVI by Remy Martin. He even thanked Xi Jinping for his openness about the provisional measures towards French cognac. Does he think trying the cognac will soften Xi's harsh stance against the liquor? Will Macron's cognac actually work when it comes to diplomacy? There is no harm in trying. And from that, let's talk about what's happening in Nepal, or should we call it the Amoeba Republic? Why Amoeba Republic? Well, because of the splits that the country has witnessed. We've all grown up learning about how amoeba splits. Now, in the political landscape, splits can trigger political instability, uncertainty, even chaos. Why am I talking about this today? Because of a major development in the country, one that has been dominating headlines. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. First, some context here. JSPN, or the Janata Samajwadi Party Nepal, is one of the coalition partners in Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda-led government. The Janata Samajwadi Party Nepal has now split. Now you get why I mentioned the terms amoeba and splits. So what really happened? Why did the split occur? This was after a majority of the lawmakers and over 24 Central Committee members applied for a new party at the Election Commission of Nepal. Basically, there have been concerns over how the party was being run. Now, like I said, Nepal is no stranger to splits. There has been a cycle of coalition making, also breaking. Major national political parties have also often turned back as far as pre-poll alliances are concerned. Basically a series of maneuvers. But the thing is, this series of changes means that the focus of the political leaders has been diverted away from the key focus area, that of fulfilling the people's aspirations. And there has been a lot of change, by the way. Change is the only constant, really does hold true for the Nepal political landscape. Let's give you a sample. Let's take you back to the 1994 to 1998 period. It was a period of political turmoil, to say the least. You see, in the elections that were held in 1991, the Nepali Congress won a majority of seats. These, by the way, were the country's first multi-party elections in 32 years. But then splits within the Nepali Congress forced the government to call mid-term elections in November 1994. Cut to how a CPN-UML minority government fell within a year, and Nepal entered a period of political instability. In the year 1998, the country's 6th government in 4 years came into being. I'm going to keep going back to the term amoeba republic because of how familiar Nepal is with splits and political instability. In the year 2009, Prime Minister Prachanda resigned. This was over a row over the failed attempt to fire the then army chief. Madhav Kumar Nepal was named the new Prime Minister, leading a 22-party coalition government. 22-party coalition government. The Maoists went into opposition and launched a series of protest programs. And in the year 2012, hardcore leftists broke away from Nepal's biggest political party and announced a new faction. This was a split that further complicated the country's messy political crisis. The Prime Minister had to call for fresh elections. Following the failure of the politicians to agree on a new constitution for the post-monarchy era, basically the constitution talks failed. And let's now talk about what happened in the year 2021. The political crisis was peaking. There was a power tussle between KP Sharma Oli and Pushpa Kamal Dahal. KP Sharma Oli, heading the Communist Party of Nepal Unified Marxist-Leninist, and Pushpa Kamal Dahal, heading the Communist Party of Nepal Maoist Centre. And this tussle made things difficult and messy. The ruling Nepal Communist Party that was formed after the merger of the two split. And cut to the present, with the JSPN or the Janata Samajwadi Party Nepal, which is one of the coalition partners in the government, now splitting. What does this mean for the country's political landscape? Where do things go from here? And will this split affect the government's stability? We will be keeping a close eye on the developments. On that note, we're taking a very short break. Stay with us. You're watching Gravitas.
Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time.
I should push myself right out of the damn tournament.
We go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 PM IST, 1 PM GMT.
Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing, Baloch separatists, Gravitas cuts out the clutter. Gravitas keeps calm when others scream. Gravitas brings news to life. Weekdays 9 PM IST, 3:30 PM GMT. Gravitas. Seeing is believing.
The biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered spectacle. WION deciphers the images and the hues. Sifts real performance from rhetoric and noise, claims and counterclaims, populist pitches and hidden truths. Untangling, unraveling this celebration of democracy.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us. You are watching Gravitas. Ten years ago, a Chinese man had a heart attack. He survived it, but slipped into a coma. And now, after 10 whole years, he has opened his eyes again. And of course, a lot has changed in those 10 years. But there has been a constant throughout. The love of his life, his wife. She is the one who patiently nursed this man back to life. The story has naturally touched millions of hearts on social media. Let's start off from the beginning. The year was 2014. The man lived in Anhui province of China. He had a wife and 2 children. It was a happy little family until one day something happened that turned their lives upside down. The man went into a cardiac arrest. The doctor saved his life, but they could not save him from going into a coma. His wife, Sun Hongxia, was shattered. Her husband narrowly escaped death. She had no clue when he will wake up, if at all. And she had 2 children to look after, all on her own. What would she do? While everything was out of her control, there was one thing she could do, that was to look after her husband and not give up hope. And that's exactly what she did. She faithfully took care of her life partner. With a prolonged coma came an array of physical complications. Sun's husband was unable to breathe, so he went through a tracheotomy, and then he needed a urinary catheter. Sun stood by his side through it all. It took hard work and patience to keep her husband alive, but Sun never wavered in her devotion. We can romanticize it all if we want. It's easy to speak about it, but in no way does it fathom all that this woman has gone through. For the last 10 years, she spent all her time and energy in keeping her husband comfortable. She made a lot of sacrifices, of course. And when asked about it, her 84-year-old father-in-law feels grateful. He says Sun is even better than a daughter and that nobody compares to her. And now finally, after years of tender, loving care, the man has recovered. He lay in a hospital bed, slowly coming back to consciousness, and he finds his wife right beside him. For Sun, it was a moment she had been waiting for the last decade. In a video clip, Sun is seen telling her husband about the past few years. Her eyes well up and she bursts into tears. She says although she feels very tired, it was all worth it in the end. Fashion's biggest extravaganza of the year. The Met Gala took place at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City earlier today. Celebrities from around the world walked the red carpet for the fundraising benefit, wearing their best. More about that in our next story.
This year's Met Gala may not have impressed Devil Wears Prada's fashion editor Miranda Priestley, but it did create some buzz. Themed the Garden of Time, 2024 Met Gala was nothing less than a full-bloomed one. Stealing all hearts this year was none other than Zendaya. The queen of red carpet returned to the extravaganza after a gap of 5 years with a bang. To honor this year's dress code, the Dune star teamed up with her longtime stylist and close collaborator Law Roach to deliver not one but two eternally stylish looks that will go down in Met Gala fashion history. First, the actor went full fairy tale villain in an incredible Maison Margiela artisanal by John Galliano creation. And then towards the end of the event, Zendaya surprised fans by reappearing at the bottom of the steps. This time wearing a magnificent black gown. A 1996 piece from John Galliano's Givenchy era. A Met Gala regular, Gigi Hadid, left many impressed. Sticking to the theme of the Garden of Time, the model wore a flowing white Tom Brown gown with an eye-catching pattern of yellow roses. But what many would not know is the entire look took a team of more than 70 people and over 13,500 hours. Another star whose outfit took 1,905 man-hours and 163 craftsmen to make was Alia Bhatt. The Indian star, who walked the Met Gala red carpet for the second time, wore a mint green custom-designed sari by Sabyasachi. Studded with real gems, the sari featured a 23-foot-long train in honor of the theme. If you ever need someone to bring you flowers in the pouring rain, Nicki Minaj has got you covered. The singer's yellow Marni mini dress, which was covered in 3D metal flowers in varying shapes and sizes, was definitely one of the most colorful and committed looks of the night. But it was the Hips Don't Lie singer who stole all the limelight. Believe it or not, Shakira had never attended the Met Gala until this year. So when she made her grand entrance wearing a Carolina Herrera gown, it was sure to leave the audience in awe of the singer. The voluminous dress, which featured a high slit and a voluminous cape, will surely go down as one of the best in the Met's history. But Shakira was not the only debutante this year. For the first time in the history of the Met Gala, a K-pop band walked the red carpet. While many would have wanted BTS to do the honors, it was Stray Kids who created history in their absence. Dressed in Tommy Hilfiger and painted in a red, white and blue palette, the boys gave nods to the colors of both the US and South Korea. Away from the theme of Met 2024 was Cardi B. Though the rapper did not flaunt any floral accessory in her look, her feather-trimmed black gown by Chinese designer Windoson took up the whole courtyard. As people correctly say, Cardi B never disappoints at the Met Gala. While these were the celebs who made heads turn on the red carpet, many others just enjoyed the grand affair. Be it Jennifer Lopez or Mindy Kaling, the Kardashians, debutante Tyla with her hourglass, or Michael Shannon with his Balenciaga snack bag. But was this Met Gala a memorable one? Well, the sign of an impactful Met Gala are the memes. And sadly, the internet was lacking them this year.
Time now for Gravitas Recall, the segment in which we get you stories from the past. It is the 7th of May, the 163rd birth anniversary of the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore. He was a great Bengali poet, writer, philosopher, novelist, and much more. He is the man who wrote India's national anthem, also that of Bangladesh. People often refer to him as the Bard of Bengal or Gurudev. In Hindi, Guru means teacher, Dev means God. And that should give you an idea about how revered Tagore really was. Tagore's contribution to the field of art and literature cannot be put into words. He was the first non-European to receive the Nobel Prize for his poetry collection, Gitanjali. He composed over 2,000 songs and painted more than 3,000 paintings. He also founded Vishwabharati University, which is now known as Shanti Niketan. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching. Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not